You want to see some big brain tricks in From the Depths? So you have this glass bridge here, right? There's nothing at the end of it. But now, artificial intelligence. Today I'm gonna show you some basic, Animimics. This is a mimic right here, and it's constantly getting, it's getting a little bigger, by the second. Can make it disappear, make it reappear again, and it's slowly getting bigger. Yeah, if you thought that, if you ever wanted to, animate, quote unquote, deco blocks, well, there's somewhat of a way to do that. What are Animimics? Where they are animated mimic blocks. Animimics do require some basic level of breadboard, but I do plan on showing the breadboards, and I do plan on making a breadboard tutorial in the near future. So to get started, yes, you can manipulate the mimic blocks using breadboard. Over here I have a super basic way of growing that artificial intelligence. So for example, if I set this to 1, if I turn on the fire piece, it will animate the mimic. If I turn it off, then the logic gate here will reset this timer. Also, mimics and Animimics can go in the negatives. So if I pull up to the brain over here, look at what's going on. We have the inverted Animimic. So yeah, this video will feature some crazy things with mimics. Yeah, this is totally 100% normal From the Depths gameplay right here. It's pretty big brained, pretty big brained. And because it's a mimic with a tiny little AI, you can have anything here. So what about the big pack piece? Boom. Lens, but in the negatives. Look at that. So what you can manipulate with the general block setter for Animimics, you have scaling, positioning, and Euler angles. So if I add the multiplier here, times 100, just as an example, and put them to Euler angles, if I go back to my Animimic and turn it on, it's rotating. What about machinery? Does that look inverted? The positioning of your mimics do matter too. So for example, this mimic is facing this direction, and this mimic's facing this direction. Could add another one as an example. And now if I activate the funny button, you'll see all of these are going in a different direction, but they're both named too. So for example, like just this thing. The generic block setter is just manipulating these blocks. So you should remember this little trick. It could save you some time. Euler angles matter too. They will rotate. For example, this is pitch, right? This mimic is pitching. This mimic is pitching. So you have to keep in mind the directions of your mimic blocks when you're fiddling with them with the Animimics. Also, because the starter fortress is full of mimics, I can do some funny things. So if I remove this, you have perfectly normal Spawn of Fortress gameplay over here, right? What if I remove this? What happens? How this? And what if I make it like this? Biblically accurate Spawn of Fortress. Also, you gotta keep in mind, the drop a button will remove your mimics back to normal. Here's an example of Animimics. Garage doors. I left the clipping there intentionally, as you can see, that the mimic is both stretching and going up. Over here you have just the simple, this is not even a door over here, this is just a mimic. Here's the breadboard for the garage door. I left this simple so anybody can copy it or make it better. But this is just an example, right? So you have a timer here. You have down here, these two are timer stoppers over here. They talk to the variable writer. But what happens is this is the mimic scaling. So basically it scales the Animimic. So you see how it's smushed over here? When it's up here it's tiny, but when it goes down it's longer. Yeah, this is what happens. And then you have the positioning. It's moving down, so you see I have plus like 2.7 here. If I put it to 3, it's up more. Look, see? And down here we have the little door. It's just a multiplier. It doesn't even have to be like this. It can be a lot simpler. Here's how it looks like on the inside. It's a little funny because it's using the little fuel radiator. So that's why it's like this. Can you even use the old fuel radiator? Radiator large old. This might look worse. All that back. Also, more quirks about Animimics is that the further away you are from them, the more laggy they are. So if I'm close, this opens and closes pretty smooth, right? If I'm over here, it's a little laggy. If I'm over here, they don't even render anymore. So you gotta keep those in mind. You can zoom in and they won't render. You can see the door there. The door mimic is rendered, but the garage door is not rendered. Also, another quirk about Animimics is that if you have a lot of them, and a lot of them are moving, they will lag each other. I just added a timer here, making the doors rotate. So if I remove a bunch of them, you'll see they're getting smoother, right? I add them back. Of course, this is another quirk of Animimics, that they take some. They might not start moving. You can put your craft in and out of play, and that should fix your Animimic. Horizontally spinning bulkhead doors at 60 FPS. Horizontally spinning bulkhead doors at 20 FPS. Now another thing that Animimics will do to you and your game is mess with your ability to do decos. Let's say I want to do a prop here, right? I want to decorate this this building. If I put this block down and try to rotate it, you'll see that it lags with the Animimics. So if I want to scale it, you can see the wireframe. The wireframe is there, but the deco actually takes some time to load. So if I try to move it around, you can see it's lagging. But if I get rid of all the mimics and I try to deco now, it's perfectly smooth. You can do things like ejecting shell casings. Give me having some detection issues. But as you can see here, we have quote-unquote ejecting shell cases. I'm gonna change this color here so it's more visible. But you have your little fake bullet casings. And of course, if the craft stops shooting, this little hatch closes. But if it's shooting, you can have your casings. It adds an interesting effect to the craft. Of course, these shell casings just despawn after some time, but you can have more complicated things. This is pretty much just 3 Animimics. All of this is just 3 Animimics. You have the hatch, and then you have the bullet casings, which are moving on this breadboard. The bullet casings are constantly moving, but the scaling is set to 0, so they're invisible. But once the APS starts shooting, they do become visible. Of course, I kept it real simple as an example. Look at them, they're like balls. I think it gives a nice effect. Over here we have a jackal, but it has custom suspension. So if I make it jump, look at it. It's a pretty fun effect at the front too. You can see the little spring going. You can see the little spring just animating. Of course, the jackal doesn't have the Animimics suspension, but what it does have is the antennas. So if I make it turn, you can see the Animimics move with the direction of the jackal. They react to the movement. Here's the breadboard for the Animimic antennas. It's pretty easy to just copy it. And this is the Animimic for the suspensions. Now I'm using 2 Animimics per wheel. You have the spring and you have the little metal pole. So that's why there's a lot going on over here. They're all connected to just one Maffei valve. So each of these are the wheels. So for example, I named this wheel 1. And then the one behind it 2, and then this is 3, and that's how I'm able to get the GBG, the general block getter, to talk to the breadboard and know specifically which wheel is doing funnies. You can see the back wheels over here. If I slow down the game, the effect is a little more noticeable, especially with how fast the jackal is. Oh, hit a bump. Look at it. Animimics can really just make your craft a little more fun to look at, you know? Something as simple as this. And I'm using 2 Animimics per I'm using 2 Animimics per wheel. And they both have to be tuned differently. So basically what happens is we have so basically what we have here is this is a general block getter. It gets the extension spring of each wheel. So like I showed earlier, we have wheel 1, wheel 2, wheel 3. So it gets all of these, and then with all of these Maffei valves, it tells the mimics what to do. So for example, here we have A is the spring, and these 2, named 1, is the pole. The pole basically just goes up and down with the Maffei valves, but the spring just gets retracted. So for example, if I go to wheel 1, and this is the spring over here, so what if I just make it giga thick, 10, boom, mega suspension. What if I add more here? Long suspension. can see it. Another thing that these Animimics can do is that if you don't interact with the, for example, down here is scaling, up here is positioning. You can't change, for example, the scaling because your breadboard's interacting with it, right? But you can interact with the little you can interact with the pitch if you're not moving it, so you can have the suspension look up, for example. You can also just move it up and down. What if you just want to have it here, you know? Even if just one blip is used, you won't be able to interact with that. Oh no, wrong mimic. So for example, this is B, right? No, it's C. Or is it B? Here. So even if a blip is used here, this is the suspension. As you can see that little tiny line over there. You can't interact with this. You can only just move like yaw, pitch. Because these are, none of these are being manipulated by the breadboard. So you can do whatever with them. With Animimics, you can also make randomized cargo. So for example, here I have the same craft. I'm loading the same craft. Like you cannot say this is fake. Boom, you have the same craft. But they are different. Same craft. But you know, randomized cargo. For example, these guys have batteries. These guys have big shells. Big shells. Basically what happens is it randomizes things when it spawns in. So for example, spawns in, chooses a mimic. Spawns in, chooses a mimic. Spawns in. And of course it's left up to RNG. I'm gonna show you the breadboard. So over here we have the breadboard. And so what happens is this outputs 1. But if let's say the randomizer picks up like 2, then these 2 get triggered. So now you have 3. What happens is we go to Mimic 3. So Mimic 3 sees that, oh hey, this thing's outputting 3. Enable. And so we have logs, right? At 3 we have logs. What if I just what if I add, what if you go up to 4? This thing's outputting 4. So now we have batteries. What if it's outputting 3? Boom, now we have machinery. So you get the point. It's basically choosing a randomizer. And so, for example, if you go back to Mimic 3, if Mimic 3 sees that, oh, there's no randomizer 3, we're just gonna be dead. 0, 0, 0. The Mimic's basically empty sized. You know, Mimic Deco empty sized. That's how you can get a random number at spawn. You know, you can do some funny things can happen. You know. And you have over here at the back, we have, for example, we have Mimic 1 here. And all of these Mimics are named. And because these Mimics are named, for example, this Mimic's called 2, this Mimic's called 1. Over here we have a line here. So for example, 3 and 4 enable at the same time. That's how you can get multiple blocks. So for example, if it is going on right now. So we have a log and a wood material here. These are both at different sizes. These are both at different sizes. So you have the different scalings here. If the Mimic was named 3, for example, we have this kind of size. So for example, if this was renaming number 3 to 4, you'll see that it'll change sizes. Boom. But it's still visible because of the RNG. If I pull up to one of the logs and I name one of these to 3, it should just be very long now. If I name one to 1, it will just despawn, will disappear, boom, he gone. So that's basically the idea behind the randomized cargo here. You can also display the amount of mats you have with Animimics. So for example, if the craft is empty, so for example, we have a small amount of coal patch here. If we get some mats, boom, it's full now. But if you have no mats, there's barely any coal there. What about this card? This is the log card. If I'm getting rid of some RTGs, boom. We have a small amount of mats. And there's some logs displayed here. If I get rid of these, this is how the craft looks like on max materials. So basically, it's pretty much like the same principle. So we have here log B, log C, log D. All of these just get displayed after a certain amount of number is reached. Over here on the cold patch, we have 2 cold patches here. One is made for scaling, so you can't scale. This is mainly for the depth. So you have this one's the scaling one, but there's also this one which just moves up and down. So if the craft is like half, you see this mimic which just goes up and down. But if the craft is full, you see the other mimic, which adds a little more depth to the craft. I'm gonna show the breadboard. And these are the Animimics. So you have pretty much like 4 stages for the logs. You know, after a stage, after a fraction of materials is reached, then it just displays the logs. It's just using some multipliers here in this breadboard. So for example, if it's above like 70% mats, it will display log D. But if it's below like 10% mats, it will not display log A. Over here we have the little coal things. So we have the positioning. And this is just scaling. Over here using the scythe as an example. And using one of the newly added mimic blocks to the game. If I move the turret slightly up, there's a mimic that rotates. Of course, this is very janky and can be done a lot better. For example, the mimic can just rotate if the missile is loaded, so there's no like clipping. But for example, if the turret's looking up, this thing's open. But if the missile is going in the bed, boom, it's closed. It's just one Animimic, which is one of the new mimic poles, half hollow. All it does is just rotate. Also, I broke it because it was a mega mimic. Basically, the scaling here was at like 20, but because I moved one of these sliders here, it reset back to 10. Of course, this happened because I removed the little scaling feature on it to keep it simple. So here you have the breadboard, which just rotates here. So for example, if I add a constant here, you'll see the little mimic just rotating. If I go to negative, we'll go back. If I go a funny bigger number, and because I can just put this 20, like 7. So now it's back to being, it's both a mega mimic and an Animimic now. You know, it's just an example of what you can do with Animimics. because the scythe wasn't designed for any Animimics and stuff like this. Think of this build I have. Yeah, I have animated mud flaps. These are super simple. You can also see the antennas at the top here. If I suddenly just destroy the velocity on this tank, you can see them resetting. The mud flaps also just have a randomizer to mimic the wind or drag. So if you look here, up here you have the antenna Animimics, but down here you have the mud. Down here is the randomizer, which only kicks in after like 20. So like after 20 speed, it will kick in. You have it here interacting with the little mud flap, which is just a rubber block, I believe. Mud, rubber beam. What if I rubber beam it like 4 meters, clip into the floor? It's just the mud clipper out here. Anybody can recognize this craft just from the tail of it. On the Maki, we have landing gears. See these little 2 decos over here? These are the landing gears, which are all the way over here. So for example, this is the wheel, and on the other side we have the little the wheel attachment. And basically what happens is if it takes off, the landing gears goes in. But if the craft is close to the ground or the ocean, the landing gears just come back down. Look at them. It's little details like this you can add to your craft with Animimics. So these are just back landing gears. Of course the timing could be better. It's all just relying on a timer here. It's all just relying on a little accumulator here. That counts. You can see the little landing gears, but if it's in, it just goes. If the Mach is in the air, it just retracts. You can also have custom hatches for your missiles. As you can see here, now these Animimics rely on the origin of the mimic. So for example, the hatch door, if I pull it up, as you can see here, it only rotates from where where it's opening, right? So the Animimic is just relying on that part to keep things very simple. And basically what happens here is you have all these timers. So for example, hatch 1 opens at a certain time, hatch 2 at another certain time. This one's based on clamps. So for example, no matter how low this number is, for example, minus 160, the missile hatch will still be, closed. So for example, but once it passes a certain number, I'm spawning a rat, it will start animating. It'll start moving. And of course the timer stops at like 600. If we kill the enemy, the timer will just start going down. Of course this breadboard is pretty old, so it's not as efficient as it could be. But it works. It's decent. The missiles are also tied with the Animimics opening. So once the door's opened, the missile will come out. Iron Gate isn't doing too well. Bro just spawned in and he's already too low, man. It's over. Now because the enemy is dead, the hatches will close. Gonna try that again. Hopefully this time the Allen gate doesn't fall into the water. So as you can see, hatch opens, missiles coming out. Hatch opens, missiles out. These ones, of course, they are timed with the staggered fire, which gives off this nice effect. And the ones at the end here, they have a different clamp, and they end at a different angle. Has bro fallen in the water? Yeah, Great Talon's craft are kind of bad at the moment, so oh, he's coming out? Oh. Yeah, Great Talon's craft are kind of bad at the moment, so just ignore, bro. Just ignore, bro. Another fun thing you can do with Animimics is make your craft go invisible. Just like that. Yeah, and that was the G host from the Chorus Snatch faction. This was a very early prototype for the faction, but it basically just goes invisible. Of course, the craft is still there, but can't see it. The whole craft is basically remade with the mimics. So for example, this mimic is one of these blocks. This mimic is one of these blocks. Of course, it's a mess, all right? It's a mess to look at. And of course, even the wheels are Animimics. So for example, when you see the wheels turn here, these are not real wheels. Like this craft does not use wheels. These are just mimics that spin. And the wheels turning is just an effect from the Animimics. This is I think these are all the blocks that go invisible. Of course, they're all like a different size, so they all use a different multiplier. This is the turret. Yeah, the flamer is not actually, the flamer is completely mimic emptied. So that flamer that's moving, that's an Animimic. It is aiming with the flamer, so it can just clip with itself. There's also a little light effect here. These are just the dust kickoff effects, which I think I did make the effects go weaker if the craft is going invisible. Yes, you have a little bit of dust, but if the craft comes back, you have dust. It's also set up to come out of its invisibility. Of course, this can be made so much easier, but back then I wasn't so good at breadboards. It relies on this timer here that talks to this variable, which then talks to all the mimics. This here is if the flamer shooting, it will make the craft come out of invisibility. If the enemy disappears, will go invisible. It just gives a fun effect for the craft. But yeah, the Animimics here are, of course, they are a little more complex, and I don't even remember what was cooking over here. Like, look at all these clamps and multipliers. Like all of these can just be like one math eval. But this is just an example, you know? I think if you drop a button it probably stops working. Oh. Yeah, so this is how the craft looks like without all the its mimics. As you can see, there are no wheels because you can't mimic hide wheels. So the wheels had to be animated. As you can see, you can't do nothing about them. I'm gonna finish this video by rapidly approaching your location at Mach 5, the fastest craft in from the depths. Yet this one has Animimics 2 at the very front. It's using heat effects. This is one of Goldminer's crafts. So the faster the craft goes, you will see it's getting heat effects. Of course, the Animimics that I have showed in this video are just examples. You can just make your own Animimics and do whatever you want with them. But yeah, that's about it. I wish you learned something. Wish you the best. Lord God bless you.